read a testimony by a Chinese priest. He was ordained in Shanghai in 1941, and in 1950 he was appointed the apostolic administrator of the Diocese of Canton. He did not recognize the patriotic church set up by the government in China. He was in prison in 1958. He spent 22 years in prison, 7 of those in solitary confinement. And in his testimony, he said that many priests during the Cultural Revolution, Catholic priests, were forced into marriage. And when they were, the Chinese Catholics refused to accept them. They wouldn't go to them for confession. They wouldn't go to Mass when they were celebrating. They were opposed to having a Catholic priest as a married priest as a spiritual leader. And they wanted celibate priests who could dedicate their whole lives to the Lord. And he tells us that it was more than a tradition. And he said that was instinctively, that they understood instinctively that a celibate person was totally set apart for the service of the church and of the community was someone they could trust more. So there's a certain instinct here also among the Catholic faithful that a celibate priest is a much more adequate, a much more suitable, much more fitting for the job that he has to do with the vocation that he's been given. So we cannot analyze this issue under using just purely secular categories. You know? If you look at all the sociological information and all, you might come to some conclusions, but that's really not the point. We have to look at it from the point of view of the supernatural point of view, and the graces that are given, and the call of God. That's really what counts here. When we look at it from that point of view, looking at Scripture and tradition, then we'll understand that yes, you know, the call of the priest is much more suitable, much more fitting that he be celibate, incontinent, than that he be married. And the Vatican is not moving in any direction to change this. If anything, it's just the opposite. The tendency is more to ordain, even in the East, to ordain more single men. And yes, there are some exceptions made. Some of these Anglican priests who are coming over, they're allowed to come over as married persons in some cases. That's true, but that's really an exception, a very minor exception. And I don't know now whether those guidelines have been issued, whether in those communities that have come over, whether future priests are going to be allowed to marry or not. Do you know if other priests? I don't know if those guidelines have been issued yet. They said they were going to issue them, but I haven't seen it. Whether these Anglican priests, I mean, they're after they die or retire, whether the future priests of those communities are going to be allowed to be married priests or not. So that's what I have.